Hi, guys. Just bear with us. I know we've been sitting in these seats for a while, but I promise the story's pretty exciting. So my name's Kibriyaa Morgan. I go to Davidson.
I'm Ellie Kincaid. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out this. I also go to Davidson.
And this story developed as a culmination of a journalism course that we took at Davidson. So we just like to point out that we don't have any sort of like concentration or major or anything like that. Just sometimes visiting professors come to Davidson and we're allowed to take their classes. And so that's why we started to investigate this case. Yeah.
So what we were looking at was an incident that took place 20 years ago in Davidson, and at the time the town was only about 5,000 people. Kai, do you want to start?
Okay, yeah, I'll take it. Okay, so in 1998, Christmas of 1998, there was a shootout that involved a black boy, Damon Kearns Williams, and Officer Mark Swaney, and they both died in this shootout. And so, like, going into this case, obviously I had, like, my preconceptions, and I thought that I knew what had happened. We have a black boy, a white officer, something bad. This was going to be another Eric Garner or Mike Brown. But basically, we learned that we needed to check our bias at the door and just basically hold a mirror up to Davidson. And so in doing so, our goal was to answer three big questions, and that was what actually happened, as near as we could tell, what was the role of race, and what were the ripple effects across the town and through time, and how it affected specifically the white community and the black community. And might I add that Davidson is separated by railroad tracks, and historically black people live on one side, white people live on the other side.
So we had our three questions, but we weren't the only ones who had questions. The town had waited 20 years, and nobody knew what had happened, and some people did not want to know what had happened. So in the middle of this curiosity, tragedy, mourning, I naively expected the town to want to work with us, starting with my granddad, who had been the mayor at the time. Instead, I watched town officials lie to us about racism in Davidson. So in spite of this, we were able to work with different interviewees, and we finally obtained access to police reports and pieced together a narrative of what happened that night. So on Christmas of 1998, Damon Kearns was in his front yard playing with his young cousins when he was shot at in a drive-by shooting. He was not injured. His grandma called the police, and two white officers showed up, one of whom was Officer Mark Swaney. Damon was understandably agitated. The officers tried to calm him down, but the situation escalated and became aggressive. Damon was armed and fired first. The second officer, not Officer Swaney, returned the shot quickly. Three bodies fell into a ditch, and bystanders saw that Damon was missing part of his skull. Officer Swaney was bleeding profusely from the upper chest, and the third officer was not grievously injured and was calling for his radio. A mob of black neighbors gathered round, yelling racial slurs at the first responders, who were white, and mostly white police officers swarmed the area.
So white and black residents had entirely different and dichotomous reactions to this incident. White people panicked and denied the racial implications that threatened their idyllic vision of what Davidson as a small town was like. Or they either labeled this as a tragedy, or they empathized with Officer Swaney. And on the contrary, black people played into feelings of resentment and eventual silence.
So looking back at our questions, the only question left is, what was the role of race in the actual incident? A lot of white town officials, a lot of white residents had told us, like, well, this could not possibly have been a racist incident. Now, David and Mark were really good friends. They used to play basketball together. We have an arrest report from the time that Damon and Officer Swaney spent together on the basketball court. Officer Swaney approached Damon, who was 16 at the time, and a group of his friends who were playing basketball at the community center. As he approached this group of young black men, he was looking for a suspect for a different case, a suspect who he knew wasn't there because he knew all of the young men. In response to this harassment, Nieman yelled, "Fuck the police," and he was arrested for disorderly conduct. They did not play basketball together. And in this incident, which is a snapshot of an ongoing relationship, is where we identify the role of race in the case. Nieman did know Mark, and what he knew and what he felt meant that when Officer Sweeney showed up on Christmas night, Nieman was not calmed, the situation escalated, and 2 men were killed.
So zooming out, some of our challenges were that it was incredibly difficult to get people to talk to us, and more specifically, Damon's family. They just didn't want anything to do with this case. And we also had trouble obtaining the police report. So the Charlotte Police Department illegally withheld the report from us, and for months, I think, we couldn't get it. And then eventually, the Davidson Police Department stepped in, and they gave it to us as a bribe in exchange for the hope that in presenting this work, we would paint Officer Sweeney in a really sympathetic light.
And as far as what we learned from this, I want to borrow a metaphor that one of our interviewees used when he said that Davidson is like a stale cake. It's really pretty on the outside. We have a lovely main street. It's cute. Come visit. The icing's great. But when you bite in, it's not as appealing. And it's a lot easier to believe in an illusion if you have the privilege to do so. But I hope that we have the courage to admit when something doesn't taste right.
And finally, we learned, as you all know, that journalism is tough work. And by that, I also mean like tough emotional work, in that like often you don't get closure from these stories and you're left just feeling very invested in the lives of the people and also like how it impacts the town that we call home. So we simply just want to leave you with the idea that like we have to do the work and continue to just find the truth. So thank you.
Thank you.